Hey, I was muted. Yay me. Rip. Ah, God. It's not Weremage 11. It's chapter 11 in Weremage. Oh, Kristen, are you still here? I forgot. I keep meaning to tell you about a conversation that Meg and I had the other day that immediately made me think of you. So I showed her the message that you sent me in Discord last night, the DM, and she thought that was hilarious. And then she looked at the Weremage cover again, and she got really thoughtful, and and she was like, you know, Garrett, I don't know if you've realized this, but aside aside from how you like made her skin darker, but like especially on like the previous iteration where she was a lot whiter, Naya kind of really looks like me. And I was like, you think so? She was like, yeah. And I just very, very quietly said, sploosh. And she laughed. We have fun. It is the hair and the eyes, yeah, for sure. Megan's not quite that ripped. Yes, with time. Okay. Quick bio break, and then we'll keep reading. Muted. Ha ha ha. Chet saw none of it, and it was his unknowing response that broke the moment's tension. I am not eager to leave. Here we are protected, and beyond Ammon's walls I think we will find only danger. Weeth turned to him and smiled, her troubled expression vanishing, but Annis and Naya still wore dark looks, and both of them looked far away as though lost in thought. I would welcome some danger, said Jormund to Chet. We have been idle since the attack on the seat. I feel that if I do not do something soon, I may go mad. I have not seen as much battle as you, certainly, but I do not wish for more, said Chet. Mayhap you have no reason, snapped Uzo. I was in the palace when they came. I knew a lover there, a courtesan of the High King herself, and some others as well. Meaning yourself? Said Naya, smirking. Uzo's dark cheeks went darker. In any case, I saw him in the fighting. I was in formation and could not break through the lines of the shades. I watched helpless as some of them dragged him from a side room. They cut him open there in the hall and let his guts splash upon the marble floor. There was no reason to it. He had no weapon. It was slaughter for the sake of slaughter. They were all silent for a moment after that. Lauren saw Jem looking up at Uzo, his jaw hanging slack. The boy's eyes shone wet, and not from the light drizzle that fell from the sky. Fallen Clown's trying to get banned from Twitch chat. One of Jormund's massive hands tightened into a fist. I was stationed on the north wall, but I went running to the eastern docks as soon as the horn sounded. I saw the Dulmoon fleet land, and the gate had already been drawn up against them. Some of the folk from the city had been trapped outside, but rather than flee north or south, they only pounded on the gate. We tried to get it open and let them in, but before we could, the Dulmoon soldiers were set upon them, piercing them with spears so that their bodies were pinned to the wall. We all saw dark things that day, said Weeth quietly. We all have reason to hate the Shades. Lauren thought of the part she had played in the Battle of the Palace and found herself nodding in agreement. But then she thought of Zane, and that, in turn, made her think of Jordell. Vengeance, she said, but her voice broke. She cleared her throat and tried again, quietly. Vengeance is a poor reason to ride into battle. Let us not make war for hatred. We should seek justice instead. A wise man, and a mystic, taught me that. Weeth and Jormund bowed their heads. Lauren knew that they had been Cal's soldiers for some time and had known Jordell, at least in passing. But Naya gave Lauren a wry look. Why should it matter if justice or vengeance swings the sword? A head will roll free regardless. I have fought... I have fought before, and I have learned this. Give yourself whatever reason you need to fight, but when you go to battle, fight to win. Then you may dream up whatever reason you wish. You cannot do that if you are dead. Lauren's ears burned. I only mean that having a clear mind and a clear purpose may... Naya shook her head. I know what you meant. Somehow the reassurance left Lauren feeling even more embarrassed. She knew that she had been naive when she left the Birchwood and had thought that everyone she met could be held to her own rules of right and wrong. But that had ended in disaster more than once, and no more so than when Jordell had fallen in the Great Rocks. She could keep her own vow, yes, and never take a life. But she knew that if she led these mystics upon their mission and did not look upon the world with both eyes open, it would lead only to tragedy and death. The Nightblade must have honor, she told herself, but the Nightblade must also be wise, for who would call me honorable if I let others die? Her gaze drifted, and she looked down from the wall into the courtyard. The door to the stronghold opened, and a mystic stepped out. The daylight was almost gone, but she recognized him from the scar that split his chin. Huel. Her brows drew together. What? Whispered Chet, catching the look on her face. What is wrong? Hey, Kristen. Lauren did not answer him, but turned to the rest of them. I am weary from the road and desire rest, she said. I bid all of you a good night. I will show you to your quarters, said Annis brightly. Follow me. She led them down into the courtyard. The mystic stayed atop the wall, with Naya giving Lauren a final nod, along with a secretive smile that made Lauren's heart flutter. As Annis scampered down the steps, Lauren lagged behind to speak with Chet. You remember my dream upon the seat, she said. I do, said Chet, frowning. I saw a man in my dream, a man dressed in the clothes of a shade. And then when we arrived at Ammon today, I saw him again. He was in Cal's guard. He had a scar on his chin. Chet's eyes widened. I remember the one. You are certain? He was in your dream? I am. It was not a likeness. It was the same man. What? Chet stopped and looked about as though he expected to find eavesdroppers. What do you suppose it means? I do not know, said Lauren. You do not think I am going mad? Why should I think that? Said Chet, shrugging. I often dream of those who I have met in the waking world, and sometimes I see people in my dreams who do not exist at all, but never have I seen someone in my sleep only for them to appear in true life. It must mean something. Lauren gave a great sigh. Simply knowing of Chet's faith brought relief welling up within her, but it did not bring her any closer to a solution. What should we do? Who can we trust here? Said Chet.
Annis and Jem, of course, though I do not know if they will be of much help. What about Cal? Could you not tell him what you saw? I do not think he would place much stock in a dream, said Lauren. Her thoughts drifted to Naya, and she remembered how the woman often looked at her. We might tell the mystics who came with us. No, said Chet at once. We barely know that Naya woman, for we scarcely met her a week ago, and though we have known some of the others a while longer, still we have not spent much time with them. I would hardly call them friends. Yet they are capable warriors, and Naya seems wise besides, said Lauren. She is a captain, as Jordell was. We need someone who knows something of the mystics. If you must speak to one of them, speak to Weeth, or Shion, or Jormund, or Uzo, said Chet, but not Naya. Lauren gave him a look, and she thought she heard what he was unwilling to say. Almost she took him to task for it, but now hardly seemed the time. Very well, she said. Let us mention it first to Annis, only I do not think it would be wise to tell her everything at once. Chet gave a sigh of relief. I agree. Hey, what's up, Bodegazella? They increased their pace to catch up with the children again. Soon they reached their quarters, and Anna stopped them before a wooden door. I almost forgot about something. Shooby-dooby-doop-doop-doop. Ah. They increased their pace to catch up with the children again. Soon they reached their quarters, and Anna stopped them before a wooden door. I'm just across the hall in a... I'm just across the hall in a room where some mystics stay as well, she said. Jem, you're in the next room over. Lauren and Chet, your room is your own. Thank you, Anna, said Lauren. She glanced up and down the hallway. No one else was in sight. Would you mind stepping within for a moment, both of you? There was one more matter I wished to discuss. Annis and Jem frowned as they looked at each other, but they followed Lauren into her room. It was a meager place, with only a bed, a single chest, and a bureau against the wall. There were no chairs or rugs or drapes, as they had had upon the seat, nor even a window, and only a small... well... Jem is in the next room over. Lauren and Chet, your room is your own. Thank you, Annis, said Lauren. She glanced up and down the hallway. No one else was in sight. Would you mind stepping within for a moment, both of you? There was one more matter I wished to discuss. Annis and Jem frowned as they looked at each other, but they followed Lauren into her room. It was a meager place, with only a bed, a single chest, and a bureau against the wall. There were no chairs or rugs or drapes, as they had had upon the seat, nor even a window. There were neither chairs, nor rugs, nor drapes, as they had had upon the seat, nor even a window, and only a small hole near the ceiling so that burning a lantern did not make the room too stuffy. Lauren closed the door behind the children and stood before them, fidgeting with her hands. What is it, Lauren? Said Annis. Clearly something troubles you greatly. I must ask you to trust me, Lauren blurted out, but I cannot tell you exactly why. The girl's nostrils flared. Is this about Huel? What is the matter with you, or with him? Spit it out. She put her hands to her hips and for a moment looked just like her mother as she scowled. Yes, it is Hewell, said Lauren. Is there anything at all that you know about him? The smallest detail might help. Annis threw up her hands. I've told you I know almost nothing. I believe he is a messenger, but I am not even certain of that. Lauren and Chet shared a look. A messenger? Who better to act as a spy for the enemy? Jem was frowning at the both of them now. Honestly, what is the matter with you? He said. Jem was frowning at the both of them now. What under the sky has you so worried? He said. I've not seen you this anxious since just before the attack upon the seat. There's nothing for it, she said quietly to Chet. I know, he said. Lauren took a deep breath and spoke in a whisper. I think he may be a shade. The room went very still. Annis and Jem both froze, as though they were afraid a movement might reveal them to some unseen enemy. At last Annis licked her lips. Why? She said. I cannot explain that, said Lauren, but for my peace of mind, if nothing else, we must look into it. How? Said Jem. I do not think I could walk up to him in the dining hall and ask, Say, do you have another change of clothes that are blue and gray? Have you lost a friend named Triskin recently? What do you mean to do? I do not know exactly, said Lauren, but we can start with his personal effects. The chances are small that we will find anything to prove what I suspect, but we have to try. Annis shivered. Very well, we can do it tomorrow. I will find out where his quarters are. I will serve as a lookout, said Jem. We are resolved then, said Lauren. Now go to bed, both of you, and ready yourselves. Let us all hope that I am wrong. Chapter 11 done. Chapter 12. Annis worked with remarkable speed. Well before the next day's midday meal, she approached Lauren and Chet with Jem in tow. She led them unerringly through Ammon's halls to the part of the keep where Cal's household guards slept. When she pointed out the door to Hewell's room, Lauren led them all off down the hallway and around the first corner. Wait here, she told Chet. Annis, you go down to the other end of the hall. If someone approaches, cough as loudly as you can, louder than someone struck with plague. We will slip out of the room as quickly as we may. Jem puffed out his chest. Mayhap I should stand guard. I may have the loudest cough in all the 9 kingdoms. Who could doubt it, said Lauren, letting no trace of a smile touch her lips. But you are also the wiliest and sneakiest thief Cabras ever produced. The boy nodded thoughtfully. I cannot argue with that. Very well. Oh, what's that personality test? What is it, the Briggs-Myers test? Myers-Briggs test? Oh, rip productivity. I'm Eric. Too fast, too furious. You are a relatively reserved and quiet person. It's not often I strongly disagree with something, but... I'm still doing it. ENTJA. More extroverted than 77% extroverted, 83% intuitive, 66% thinking versus feeling. Okay. 58% judging. All right. 66% assertive. Commander personality. The commander. Ha. Fat chance. Natural born leaders? Nah. I don't know about that. Okay. Okay. Happiness lies in the joy of achievement. That is definitely true. The underlying thought running through the commander mind might be something like, I don't care if you call me an insensitive bastard as long as I remain an efficient bastard. I would say that's my natural tendency, but I work very hard not to let that be the dominant philosophy that actually guides my actions. If there's anyone commanders respect, it's someone who is able to stand up to them intellectually, who is able to act with a precision and quality equal to their own. I mean, I would... Okay. I would say most of the people I respect, like, intellectually dwarf me, but I guess that's the same thing? Commanders you may know. Steve Jobs, yay. Gordon Ramsay, okay. Mostly an asshole, but when you see him work with children, I'm totally fine with that. Harrison Ford, fuck yeah. Margaret Thatcher, ooh. It says ENTJ-A. I don't know what the dash A means. Commanders are curiously very sensitive to validation and feedback. Yup. Strengths are pretty spot on. Mostly. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Weaknesses are pretty spot on, especially impatient. Yeah, okay.
The protagonist personality? Oh. I think I think I know why you thought I was the protagonist. Um, is because, well, I haven't read the whole thing, but like there's this section right here. Protagonists are vulnerable to another snare as well. They have a tremendous capacity for reflecting on and analyzing their own feelings, but if they get too caught up in another person's plight, they can develop a sort of emotional hypochondria, seeing other people's problems. But mostly the point of like protagonists are vulnerable. They have protagonists are have a tremendous capacity for reflecting on and analyzing their own feelings. That is something I do through tremendous effort. I don't spend a lot of naturally on my default setting, I don't spend a lot of time reflecting on and analyzing my own feelings. And it's only in the last few years that I've realized that I need to, and I also need to reflect on other people's thoughts and feelings, because I grew up very selfish and very narcissistic, and that is still my default setting. You know what I mean? Like there's my personality, and then there's the person that I'm trying to be and like might become one day. Yeah, I'm really interested in the relationship board. Where is that? Well, I mean, I would really just want to I would actually just want to see, not that it really matters, but I would really like to see what Megan's personality is and if we're like supposed to be good together. Anyway, I'm going to get back to work. I'll read the rest of the stuff later. Da, 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 da. The boy nodded. Gleek. The boy nodded thoughtfully. I cannot argue with that. Very well. As Annis ran down the hall to the next corner, Lauren and Jem slipped into the room. His bed is the first on the left, Annis had told him. They found it at once. He had a small cupboard near the head of his bed and the normal chest at the foot. The chest had no lock, and at first the customary chest. And the customary chest at the foot. Within the chest, they found some folded letters. Lauren handed the letters to Jem, for she could not read them, but they contained nothing nefarious. Other than that, the chest held only several changes of clothes and a second pair of boots. Lauren turned the boots upside down and shook them, but there was nothing hidden within. The cupboard at the other end of the bed was no better, holding only a few tunics. Lauren probed them with her fingers to see if something was folded inside, but they were only harmless cloth. They left the room as quickly as they had entered and left the... And... They left the room as quickly as they had entered and walked away with Chet and Annis in tow. Lauren scowled as they walked, slamming a fist into her palm. INFP? I think Amy's INFP. She told me what she was, but I forget. Not that there was any great hope, but I thought I might find some sign, a pendant with the shade's mark mayhap.
I mean you no offense, said Jem, but if this Hewell were careless enough to keep such a thing in his possession, I think he would have been discovered long before we arrived. If he is even a shade in the first place, said Annis, and since you will not tell us why you think he might be, I cannot offer any other ideas of how we might learn whether it is true. It is true. Mayhap it is nothing, said Lorne. This was likely a foolish idea in the first place. Forgive me for bringing you into it. Chet stopped short, forcing the rest of them to do the same. You did not summon us on some lark, Lorne, he said quietly. I think you should tell them. Then they may understand why this is so important, and why we should not stop our search here. Lorne looked about. The hall was empty, but still she felt out of place, as though there might be spies eavesdropping around either corner. Very well, but not here. Annis raised an eyebrow. You said only yesterday that this was a stronghold filled with allies. Are you so fearful of being overheard? I said that to the mystics, who no doubt believe it themselves, said Lorne. I myself am not entirely convinced. Come, we are not far from our rooms and can speak more privately in my chamber. Our chamber, muttered Chet, but he smiled as he said it to soften the words. Lorne led them onwards, and soon they had enclosed themselves in the room. When Lorne had checked poor Chet. When Lorne had checked twice that the door's latch was secured, she turned to the children, but looking upon their expectant faces, she suddenly balked and turned to pace the room instead. Spit it out, Lorne, said Annis. Whatever you have to say, delay helps nothing and no one. I do not myself understand it, said Lorne, therefore I am leery of trying to explain it, for it is a mad tale. Jem scoffed. And we are all of us strangers to mad tales after all the leagues we have ridden together. That made Lauren smile, and her worry eased slightly. I see your point. Very well. I saw Hewell in a dream, while we were still upon the seat. You remember, Jem, how I awoke in terror one night? Jem nodded, frowning. I saw many things in my dream, but among them I saw your mother, Annis, and behind her stood Hewell, but he wore the blue and gray of a shade, and not the red cloak of a mystic. Wait, do you mean you saw him? Said Annis. That is, do you mean that you saw him? That is, do you mean that you saw him? Jem blinked at her for a moment before he said carefully, I think she means to ask whether you saw some man who looked like Hewell. No, said Lauren, it was no likeness. It was Hewell. He looked into my eyes and he smiled. He had the same scar on his chin, the same hair, and it was him. That is odd indeed, said Annis. I've never heard of anything like it. I would say it is some sort of spell, except that I have never heard of a wizard who could do such a thing. Chet spoke quietly from where he was leaning on the wall. Tell them why the dream matters. Yes, there is more, said Lauren. One night when we traveled across Dorsey, I fell asleep while on watch, or was charmed into slumber. When I woke, our camp was surrounded by a party of elves. The room went silent, and the lamp fluttered, as though a chill breeze had blown through to freeze them all solid. Jem seized Annis's sleeve in fear, and Chet's hands balled to fists at his sides. But then the moment passed, and Lauren let loose a quiet sigh of relief. Elves? Squeaked Jem. They came upon us? How did you make them leave? She did not, said Annis, her voice shaking. You cannot make an elf do anything, no more than you can send away a winter gale by scolding it. What did they want, Lauren? What did they do? They wanted nothing, and they did little, said Lauren, speaking carefully. She had no intention of telling Annis about the maidstones that she held, even now, in a pocket of her cloak. Not even Chet knew that secret. But one of them touched my skin, and when it did, I could see everything, inside and out, and the threads that bound it all together. It almost drove me mad. Mayhap for a moment it did. But this dream, it came after I met the elves, and in the dream I felt the way I did when they stood before me. Jem snapped his fingers and pointed at her. When the Lord Prince met us upon the seat, he said it. He said you were elf-touched. That is why. Yes, said Lauren. And he is right, said Annis quietly. I did not see it so clearly before we parted, but I see it now, whether because I am searching for it or because it has grown more pronounced in the weeks that have passed. But there is a light in your eyes that was not there before, Lauren, and a sort of sharpness to you. Are you certain the elves did nothing else? Nothing but the maidstones, thought Lauren, but she already knew from Zane that that had nothing to do with it, or her dreams. Nothing, she said. It must have been their touch. But even if this is true— No, do not look at me that way. You know what I meant, said Jem. But how can we be certain of your dream's purpose? None can know the thoughts or intent of elves. They may not even have meant to do whatever it is that they did to you. Whether they meant to or not, Lauren saw what she saw, said Chet. I do not think that is something we can easily dismiss. I think you are right, said Annis. This paints everything in a different light. Even if Hewell is not a shade, such a vision cannot be cast aside without careful thought. Mayhap the dream was only a message, leading you down the right path to find them. Huel could be the link that leads you to the shades without being one himself. Lauren had not thought of that. It is possible, but how can we know? By watching, said Chet. It seems the only thing we know about him for certain is that he is a messenger for Cal. Thus when next he delivers a message, we should watch him, even follow him if we can. Will you know when he leaves, Annis? Said Lauren. I can find out, said Annis, and I will tell you at once. Very well, said Lauren. Let us hope I am not wrong about this, and that we do not waste our time on some useless flight of fancy. Chapter 12, Dern. Dern, took a gerbs. Chapter 13. Beginning the next day, Annis kept a careful watch on all messengers coming to and leaving from Ammon, but Huel was not one of them, and days passed while they waited impatiently. The longer the waiting went on, the greater grew Lauren's frustration. We're on chapter 13. I should just stick with that. Before a week had passed, she had begun to fidget incessantly with her hands, and often caught herself picking at her fingernails with a knife, though they were already immaculately clean. Hint, hint. Chet tried to be patient with her, but after she snapped at him on the fourth day, he loosed his own irritation. If this bothers you so, why do you not bring the matter before Cal? You are the Nightblade. Word of your suspicion should be enough for him to take at least some action, or at the very least he might tell you when he next plans to send Huel out on some errand. And what exactly should I say? I saw your messenger Huel, who you have known since he was a boy, in a dream, and he was dressed as a shade. Cal seems to place great faith in me. He will likely clap Huel in irons straight away. Cal seems to place such great faith in me, he will likely clap Huel in irons straight away. They did not speak the rest of that day. Lauren managed to bring herself to apologize the next morning, but the situation only grew worse, and not least because Cal himself did not seem to need Lauren for anything at all. When she tired of lurking around the stronghold, hoping to catch Huel in some wrongdoing, she would often make for the Chancellor's council chambers. But every time she entered after a timid knock, Cal would send her away, saying that he knew no more than the last time he had seen her, and that she must be patient. He kept Annis close, however, and so at mealtimes Lauren would pry her for information. Yet Annis knew precious little, for she and Cal still spoke only of logistics and supply lines, and these bored Lauren almost to tears. After a time, she accepted her fate, and she began to spend most of her days on the stronghold's training grounds. There, wrapped in her black cloak against the persistent rain, she practiced her archery. Albert had not had enough time to teach her the finer points of Colentin archery, but she remembered his lessons clearly, and over again she went through the forms he had shown her. By now, she had advanced to the point where she could draw an arrow and fire it in the space of a heartbeat, but her aim often suffered. Can I? Ew. Draw an arrow and fire it in the space of a heartbeat, but her aim often suffered. If she wanted accuracy, she had to revert to the way she had learned to shoot growing up, placing the arrow on the left of her bow and holding it steady with her forefinger. Sometimes Chet came to join her. At first she tried to pass on what Albert had taught her, but he gave it up after only one afternoon. I prefer shooting the way I have learned, he said. My father taught me to shoot that way, and it was how I put game on the table for many years. Why should I need to learn another style? Lauren wondered if he would say the same thing if he had ever seen Albert shoot. The Colentin man had been able to empty a quiver in the time it took her to fire only 2 arrows, and every shot found its mark and could puncture chainmail besides. Had more. The Colentin man had been able to empty a quiver in the time it took her to fire only 2 arrows, and every shot found its mark and could puncture chainmail besides. Chet did not spend nearly so much time in training as she did, however, for he spent most of his days within the stronghold. He and Weath had become fast friends on their journey north to Ammon, and now she had taken it upon herself to teach him to read. He told Lauren that it came to him slowly, but that he was learning the way of it. That is well, said Lauren. I have little time for such learning, and so you can read my letters for me. He gave her a mock scowl. Many of the mystics in the fortress spent their days in the training yard as well, and Naya was among them. Though Lauren often bundled up against the weather, Naya took no such measures, and she still wore her high-necked leather shirts with no sleeves. Lauren lost count of the number of times she found herself standing and staring at the mystic's thick and muscular arms. They bore no scars. Either Naya wore armor when she went into battle, or she was a far better fighter than any opponent she had yet faced. The mystic often caught Lauren staring at her, and Lauren would blush as she hurriedly returned to her archery. Once Naya approached her while she was shooting. Lauren paused and looked at her expectantly, one arrow halfway to the string. But Naya only shook her head and waved her hand, prompting Lauren to continue. Lauren knocked and fired, drew, knocked and fired. But with Naya watching, she tried too hard to make the motions look smooth and fluid, and her aim was even worse than usual. One arrow missed the target entirely and snapped in two against the stone wall behind. "Who tried to teach you the Clinton style?" said Naya. "You recognize it," said Lauren. "I thought you were from Wavemount." "I am, and yet I have fought beside soldiers from all the 9 kingdoms, and I have seen enough Clinton archers to know that whoever instructed you was a poor teacher, or mayhap they did not have as much time for your lessons as they should have." Lauren thought of Albern with a stab of heartbreak, and of guilt. "It was the latter," she said quietly. "My instructor was... well, he is lost now." Naya let a silent moment pass. "He taught you the forms all right, but only from the waist up." She came over, and before Lauren knew what was happening, Naya was right behind her, with one hand on her waist and the other on her left shoulder. "You lean the way you should, and you have your left shoulder left shoulder lower than your right, the way you ought to, but your legs are the problem." "What about my legs?" said Lauren. It was suddenly hard to speak around the quickening of her breath, as well as the sploosh. That made things difficult. If Naya noticed how flustered Lauren had become, she did not remark upon it. She knelt and took Lauren's right knee in her hands, pushing it gently so that it bent. "You learned the more ordinary type of shooting, and so you lock your knees when you fire, but your back legs should be coiled, like a serpent ready to strike." "And you must use it when you loose." Her hand slid over, and then down Lauren's left leg to her ankle. She pushed it forwards, almost causing Lauren to lose her balance as it slid on the ground. "This should be extended forward so that your body can move over it when you shoot, like a hinge." I do not entirely understand," said Lauren. One hand rose to draw her hood a bit farther around her face, to hide how red she had become. With a chuckle, Naya rose to stand behind her once more. She put her left hand on Lauren's waist and her right on Lauren's torso, just under the pit of her arm. "You use your whole body to fire, not just your arms. Act as a lever to propel the arrow forwards. Like this." She pushed her hands together so that Lauren leaned forwards. "That sort of motion, every time you shoot. It adds only a little more power to each arrow, but that little bit of power can be the difference between a killing shot and only a deep wound. And in the meanwhile, it adds a motion to your body that gives you better control over the arrow." Lauren could feel the woman's breath on her cheek. She had to force herself to speak. "You did not learn all of this only watching Clinton archers." "I did not say I only watched them. Try it. Loose an arrow." Her fingers fumbling, Lauren drew as Albern had taught her and loosed towards the target. But the motion of her legs was unfamiliar, and the arrow clattered off the cobblestones before skittering past the base of the target. "Your training has gone amiss. That was my worst shot yet." "My advice is sound, but you are too well practiced at doing it the wrong way," said Naya. "Keep at it, and mayhap one day you will shoot like a true Clinton." She stepped back, and Lauren loosed a long, low breath. But then Naya slapped her rump, and she leapt into the air, barely restraining a scream. Whirling, she readied herself to give Naya a tongue lashing, but the mystic was already striding away and had soon vanished into a door leading into the stronghold. Lauren tried to still her racing pulse as she drew her cloak around her again. She surveyed the training yard to see if anyone else had been watching, and felt sick to her stomach as she saw Chet standing nearby. He was under an awning, one hand still on the door through which he had emerged, and for half a moment Lauren hoped he had only just come out, but the look on his face told her that he had been there long enough, at least, to see the moment when Naya left. Lauren forced a smile and waved to him, and slowly he made his way over to her. "Who could have known that mystic training was quite so involved?" said Lauren lightly. She knew at once that it was a foolish thing to say, but she could not remain silent against the smoldering anger in his eyes. His expression was not unfamiliar to her. She had seen it often enough in the birchwood, but then it had been directed at her father every time he would lay his hands upon Lauren. Chet ignored her poor attempt at a joke. "I do not like that mystic woman. You are being ridiculous." His nostrils flared. "Do not do that. Do not dismiss what I say as though it has no foundation, as though we both did not witness what just occurred." Lauren sighed. She stepped up to him and placed a hand upon his cheek. "You should not worry over such trivial things. We have been sent here to Ammon for a purpose. Whatever game Naya plays at is nothing compared to that." He glowered in the direction the woman had gone. "We were sent here for a purpose, yes. What was she sent here for?" Now Lauren was beginning to grow frustrated. Are you angry at her or at me? Why should I be angry with you? He blinked twice, clearly flustered. She is the one who behaves poorly. Then do not show anger when I am around and she is not. Let her act how she wishes. Why should we care? I am my own person. Do you not trust me? Chet looked at her for a long moment. She studied his chestnut eyes, never flinching. Very well, he said at last quietly. You are right. Of course I trust you. Lauren smiled at him, but in the back of her mind she could not quite quell her own doubts. She still felt a flutter in her chest when she thought of Naya's hand on her waist, and she could still smell the woman's breath on the edge of her cowl. Without warning, she snatched Chet's hand and dragged him towards the door that led into the stronghold. Come with me. He nearly stumbled as he trotted after her. Where are you going? To our bedchamber. I mean to prove myself still further. Chapter 13 done. I mean, I don't think this is anywhere close to a professional quality audiobook, Fallen Clown. Like, every time I finish a chapter, I say something like, Chapter 13, dern. 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 Yeah. But, so we could take a moment here to just discuss what's going on with but still, like, compared to the quality of a professional audiobook with a professional narrator, blah blah, I don't think but anyway, yeah, so we can take a moment to talk about what's going on here with the dynamic of Lauren and Chet, just because I feel like it. So Chet is jealous of Naya, obviously. He wasn't going to be, by the way, when I was originally outlining this book. But a particular beta reader, who shall remain anonymous, was like, this is bullshit, anyway. So he's jealous of Naya and of the way Naya is constantly, brazenly, openly flirting with Lauren. And the way that Lauren, because Naya is so sploosh-worthy. Exactly, Bodegasilla. And Lauren's basic response is like, yeah, but like, who cares? Who cares if she's flirting? Like, I'm not planning on doing anything with her. And to Lauren's credit, Lauren is self-aware enough to realize, I am attracted to her, but I am not planning on doing anything with her. And like, yes, I want to, but I made an agreement and I'm going to stick with it. But why isn't that enough for Chet? Well, first of all, it's because, let's be honest, Chet is a little bit of a fuckboy. A little bit, right? He just is. He feels possessive. When there has been no discussion, there's been no discussion. They've never even had a discussion about monogamy, It's a tacit understanding between the two of them. But like, why can't he just go, yo, like, let me just clarify. He goes on the assumption that they're exclusive when he's never asked that, never said that. Lauren never said anything like that. They've never had the discussion. He just goes based on the assumption because, of course, because he's a little bit of a fuckboy. And honestly, I like, in my mind, this isn't going to happen or anything. Well, I don't plan for it to happen. But if Chet were to go, hey, what do you think about us not being exclusive? I think Lauren would be surprised and she'd be like, clarify? And he'd be like, well, Weeth is kind of cute and she apparently thinks I'm kind of cute and like, we haven't had a discussion about it. Then Lauren would be like, huh. Well, what does that mean for us? And he's like, well, I mean, I wouldn't mean anything necessarily. It would just, I mean, like, what would you be okay with that? And I think after some thought, Lauren would kind of be like, okay, but it's like, it's both ways, right? And if Chet were to go, oh yeah, absolutely, then Lauren would be like, okay, cool. Then I'm totally fine with it, right? Like, that discussion would be fine. But if it came the other way, if Lauren originated that, if Lauren was the one to come to him and be like, What about not being? What about not? You know, what about not being? Not being exclusive, as he's written in, as he is, not in that hypothetical scenario. But Chet would be like, absolutely not, no way. He wouldn't be down with that. Which is like the one way that Chet is actually less of a fuckboy than Eben. But so why? So other than just the fact that Chet is like honestly a little bit of a fuckboy, right? Why does it bother him? It's because Chet doesn't care about the stuff going on in the Nine Lands. He doesn't care about the threat of the Necromancer. He doesn't care about the mission of the Mystics, or catching Damaris, or Rogan, or stopping the war. All he cares about is having a fun adventure of like seeing different stuff, wanting to travel and like see some of the Nine Kingdoms, and then settling down for a quiet life in the forest by the river, you know, hopefully married to Lauren and having babies. That's what he wants. That's his whole life goal. And Lauren recognizes that, but Chet does not recognize her life goal. He does not recognize and respect that her goal is to help people, is to protect, is to take on Jordel's mantle and stop a war that's going to get people killed. Because she was in the Battle of Welmont. She knows what war is like. For Chet, war is an abstract concept, and it's something he doesn't want to have anything to do with. Lauren realizes it's going to happen one way or another, and she wants to stop it. She wants to do whatever she can to stop it from happening. Now, if Chet doesn't realize that that's her reality and that's her perspective, it's easy for him to see why Lauren would, as he sees it, be unfaithful. Why? Because to him, that relationship, love, sex, to be honest, all of that, that's the most important thing in his life. That's kind of the only thing he cares about. Lauren doesn't. If she was forced with a choice, if she was like, you can pick one, stopping the war or being with Chet, she would barely hesitate before she picked stopping the war. And Chet would be the exact opposite. And so for him, Chet can see that Lauren is attracted to Naya. And for him, if he felt that way and was like really attracted to them, that's it. He would be unfaithful. He would cheat. He would be unfaithful. Again, there's been no discussion about faith, monogamy, exclusivity, or anything like that. So it's not really applicable. But that's the most important thing to him in his life. To Lauren, it doesn't fucking matter. It's like, I mean, yeah, it's fun. It's cool. But like, I don't give two shits. Yeah, she makes me feel a certain, sploosh, right? But so what? So what, sploosh? Sploosh doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It's not as important as literally everything else that's going on in my life. And that is part of the reason that Chet and Lauren have their tension. Yeah, I think it's a little too simplistic to say that he's not a good person under the surface, but he is not. We also have to realize that the thing about Chet is okay, two things. In Weremage, he is made to finally he doesn't know that this is what he's doing, right? he has grown up with this assumption of Lauren, this thought that she is this type of person and that their relationship is, and that their relationship is this certain type of way. In this book, part of Chet's journey as a character is actually getting to know Lauren for really the first time. And when he does make the right decision. I mean, right? He's like, yeah, like, I get it. That's your thing. And so we need to figure out how to work forward from here. But like, he actually does get it in that moment when he finally realizes that Lauren is who she is, which he's never done before. And I don't think that not seeing her for who she really was necessarily makes him a bad person. It just means that he needs to be, needed to be more empathetic. And then the other thing too is that one reason Chet sees her that way, one reason he feels the way that he feels about her and their relationship as a whole, is because of his mom. Because Chet is a young man who could theoretically be starting his life. But the life that he wants to start is with Lauren. And he and Lauren have spent a lot of time together, and they have said they would much rather have a life together than the life that Lauren's parents are trying to set up for her. So what could be the possible solution for that? Well, Chet could go out in the world and seek his fortune, and come back with enough of a dowry for her parents. But he can't. Why can't he? Because he can't leave while his mom is sick. Because she could go at any time. Anytime, right? So he can't. So there's a problem, and the solution is right there, but he can't. And that solution would be better for him, and it would be better for Lauren, but it's not what's right for his family. It's not what his moral code says is the right thing to do. And so he doesn't. And he's been living with that for years. In my mind, he's just a little bit younger than Lauren, so he's about 15, and he has probably been thinking since he was in his since he turned 13, okay, I got to start like preparing for adulthood now. What do I want my adulthood to be like? Well, I want to live peacefully. I don't want to live in this village, but I want to live close. I want to live in the forest. I want to live in the birchwood, and I want to marry Lauren. And so he's been living with years for this situation that he can't do anything about because he has chosen to put other people first. And I'm not saying that it's right that to some degree made him a little bit selfish, but it's really understandable why that would make him a little bit selfish, because while he's very, very sad when his mom passes away, it's also like, okay, that is done now, and I can start living my life for myself. And remember that when Lauren left the Birchwood, that was the plan. They're like, well, that was the dream. And they were both like, God, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? And that was like her highest aspiration in life. That was the unachievable dream that she'd never thought would actually manifest. And then Chet shows up and he's like, that unachievable dream that we thought would never manifest, that we've literally been talking about for years? Here we go. And she's like, I kind of don't want that anymore. And he's like, oh, you don't want, because this other thing is happening right now. Okay, let's take care of the thing. Yeah, no, good. You got a thing going on. Absolutely. It's been a few months since we've seen each other. We got a thing going on. Let's do the thing. Let's handle the thing. And then we can go back to the unachievable dream that is now achievable. And Lauren's like, keeps trying to tell him, no, that it's not, like, that was the best I had. But it's not even, that was the best thing I had at the time, but it's not even what I want at all anymore. And that's a hard thing. That's a really hard thing. So anyway, Chet, poor Chet. And that's the thing. That's why I say poor Chet. It's not just to be all like snarky and whatever. It's like she outgrew him. She went on a journey and she came back, or they reunited, and she's so much bigger than him. She's such a bigger person. She's got bigger goals, bigger dreams. She's got a higher level of responsibility. She's now taken ownership. She's taken responsibility for the safety of everybody in Underrealm. And that is so much bigger than him. And against that, he as a person, as an object of her desire, he just doesn't stand a chance. So he's a little bit of a fuckboy, but I think we can still pity him. Chapter 14. Tristan stood upon the stone bridge, menacing in his armor. One massive fist clutched his spiked warhammer near its head, and its butt rested upon the stones near his feet. The feathers of one of Albern's arrows protruded from his eye socket, but through the blood that streamed down his face, white teeth gleamed in a grin. You brought me the Yeren girl, an abomination and a mystic to kill, he said. Sick laughter poured from his throat, dragging rotten fingernails of terror up Lauren's back. I could have asked for no finer gifts. I've brought you nothing, she screamed, for the storms had started and she could hardly hear herself over the thunder. We killed you. How can you kill that which will not die, he said, throwing his head back and cackling. How can you kill that which serves death itself? Then she saw that he stood on a cairn. She remembered it well. They had built it over Jordel's body. She fell to her knees, weeping as she had when first they buried the mystic, and then she fell back, shrieking in terror, as a hand covered with desiccated flesh burst from the mound of stones. Am I using desiccated correctly? Yes. Did I spell desiccated correctly? Yes, I did. Okay. She landed hard on her rear end, wincing from the impact on the stone bridge, except that she was no longer on the stone bridge. Instead, she lay upon a soft silken bed, and fine cloth of many colors was draped. This is a scene you haven't read yet, Kristen, so if you don't want spoilers, you should mute it for a couple minutes. Instead, she lay upon a soft and silken bed, and fine cloth of many colors was draped upon the walls of the small room. 2 torches were mounted in sconces, but to Lauren they seemed far too large, and their flames licked at the drapes. Her sharp intake of breath brought the sense of fine perfume and wine, and she realized that she was in a house of lovers. Blushing furiously, she pushed herself up, intent on leaving, but then she went stock still as the room's door opened. The lover entered, a woman Lauren had never seen before. She looked like an Edresian, and her long black hair was worked into a single fine braid. Though she was clothed, the cloth was... the fabric. Just because that's awkward as fuck to read out loud. Though she was clothed, the fabric was so sheer that Lauren's blush grew twice as deep. Though she was clothed, the fabric was sheer enough to redouble Lauren's blush. Though she was clothed, the fabric was sheer enough to deepen Lauren's blush considerably. Yes. The lover's gaze locked on Lauren, and she swayed as she made her way towards the bed. When she reached the foot of it, she did not stop, but crawled forwards on hands and knees. I did not mean to come here, said Lauren. How had she come to be here, anyway? She could not remember. I must go. Chet awaits me. Not for long, said the girl. Stay with me. You have paid, after all. I assure you I have not, said Lauren. She tried to leave, but her body would not respond, as though it knew she did not truly wish to go. Her eyes went to the torches on the walls. Their flames rose ever higher. How had they not already caught the silks in a blaze? The lover was close now, too close for Lauren to escape without pushing her away. Her lips pressed against Lauren's ear. Would you like to meet my mother and father? She whispered. The question was so unexpected that Lauren was shocked out of the moment. What? She said. Who are your parents? He wonders, said the lover. All of a sudden she drew back and curled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them like a child huddling against the cold. He wonders, and I cannot tell him." Lauren nearly asked who the lover was talking about, but then she cried out, for the torches had caught the walls on fire at last. She leapt from the bed, trying to pull the lover with her, but the lover merely lay on the bed, curling further in on herself, and began to weep. And now the door was wreathed in flames. They could not get out. The smoke burned her eyes, forcing her to shut them as she coughed and fell back on the bed. Only she did not land upon the bed, but in a foul-smelling flow of filth and refuse. She fought to get clear of it, and her hand struck stone. It was the edge of the channel, and she knew that she was in the sewers of Cabris. Coughing and spluttering, she emerged from the stream, falling breathless upon her back. Snick. Cold steel pressed against her throat. Lauren froze. "Sweet, simpering little tart," hissed a familiar voice. It was Auntie. Crouching, she held Lauren's own dagger to her throat. "Why did you come back here? You should never have returned." "I did not mean to come here," said Lauren, unable to stop the tears that poured from her eyes. "Please forgive me. I will leave. I will never come back. I will—" "It is the way you hold yourself," said Auntie, lifting the dagger. Lauren thought she was free, but then Auntie's other hand seized her throat. "The hip juts out slightly." With a shriek, she plunged the dagger into Lauren's heart. That might be a stance of rest, but this hand you hold a bit farther from your body than the other. She withdrew the dagger, but only to sink it into Lauren's heart again, and then pull it out, and then again, and again, and now Lauren could not even scream, for only blood came bubbling up from her lungs. It is ready to leap to the hip and draw forth the knife, the knife, the knife, the knife, the knife. The world slowly went black, and Auntie's furious screams faded to nothing. Then, in the blackness, Lauren heard the sound of rushing water. She opened her eyes, when did she close them, and saw that she stood in a city of gold. It was built around a waterfall, the source of the sound she had heard. The city was built in 2 levels, one at the bottom of the falls and one at the top. The buildings all glistened and gleamed with gold trim, which shone all the more in the light mist that pervaded the air. She was on a balcony not unlike the one she had had in the High King's palace, one that afforded her an excellent view of the city and the lands all around, a landscape similar to the one surrounding Ammon, with strange trees that hid dark pathways. "Welcome to Dahab." The voice made her jump. She turned to see Huel standing beside her on the balcony. He did not look at her, but only leaned on the railing, looking out. Again he wore the blue and gray of the shades. Without warning, he leapt up on the railing, and then his mouth became a beak, his feet claws, and his hands wings. He had turned into a crow. With a raucous cry, he took to the air, soaring higher and higher as he spiraled up into the mists coming off the waterfall. Lauren watched the bird soar for a moment, and then she found that she was no longer upon the balcony. Now she stood upon a huge pillar of stone in the midst of the river near the bottom of the waterfall. Its roar deafened her, and she could barely keep her footing upon the slippery rock. Then she saw that Damaris stood there, just out of arm's reach, and behind Damaris was Gregor, and now the bodyguard was truly giant-sized, with hands as large as Lauren herself. He reached out for her, and though she wanted to flee, there was nowhere to go. His fingers wrapped around her, and she barely managed to squeeze out between them, but they wrapped around her again and again, each time dragging her closer. "I will take everything," said Damaris. Gregor seized her at last, and he lifted her to hold her suspended before the waterfall. Between his fingers she could only just glimpse his face and his cheeks that were sliced open, and the bloody, ruined mess of his mouth, the stab wounds all over his body that seeped blood through his clothing and chainmail. His hands fell away from her, and she thought she would plunge into the river far below, but she landed on the pillar again. She looked up, wondering why he had released her, only to find that he now held Jem, Annis, and Chet, and that they now hung over the water in her stead. Lauren rose to her knees before the giant and clasped her hands to beg. "Please let them go," she cried. "Let them go. You want to kill me. Since the beginning you have only wanted to kill me." "I told her to kill you, yes." Gregor's voice was like thunder. It struck her like a fist to the chest. "She would not listen, and her love for you made a corpse of me." "Everything," whispered Damaris in her ear. Gregor released her friends, and they fell into the water. But at the last moment Chet reached out and grabbed an outcrop of the pillar Lauren stood on, and the children clung to his arms. He tried to lift them all, but the weight was too much. Screaming, Lauren fell to her stomach and reached for him, trying to help him up. The children climbed over him and took her hands, and she got them to safety. At last she reached Chet, but she could not raise him. He was too heavy. Chet looked into her eyes for a long moment. Then his arms slipped and he fell into the abyss, for it was not the waterfall but the stone bridge again, and his broken body fell to lie beside Jordel's forever. Even as Lauren screamed redoubled, she felt hands seize her cloak. She looked up, expecting to see Gregor again. Instead, she found Jem and Annis. They had ruined mouths just like Gregor's, and they laughed as they pitched her over the edge of the bridge. She came awake screaming again. Chet was fighting to hold her down. This time she had just enough presence of mind not to strike him, but she could not still her panicked screams, and guards in red cloaks came bursting into the room, swords drawn. "It is all right," cried Chet. "She is all right. Only help me hold her." One of them came, taking Lauren's arm and holding her in place as she slowly got her bearings. Her gaze roved all over the room, and she could not force it to stay any one place for long. "Lauren, Lauren," said Chet. He took her face in his hands and forced her to look at him. "Lauren, it is me. You are here with me and Ammon. It is all right. There is no one there. Come back to me." At last her hand stopped trying to find purchase on a bridge that was not there. A long, shuddering breath escaped her. I am all right. I am all right." "Yes, you are," he said, and pulled her close. She clutched him to her, staring over her shoulder into nothingness. "Is she ill?" said the guard who had remained by the door. "Should I fetch an apothecary?" "No," said Lauren at once. "Are you certain?" said Chet. "Mayhap some dream wine." "No, Chet," she said, pushing back to look at him. "I am all right. It was only another dream." A look of recognition crossed his face. Once again she had seen... A look of recognition crossed his face. He heard what she had not said, that once again she had seen visions. He turned to the mystics and shrugged. "As she says, thank you." The guards did not look eager to leave, but Lauren seemed to have grown calm again, and so they left the room. Chet turned to her and whispered, "Did you—" "Shush," said Lauren, putting a finger to his lips. She listened hard. Finally, after the space of several heartbeats, she heard the quiet footsteps of the mystics as they slipped away after having lingered for a moment. A sigh slipped from her. "They are gone." She fell back upon her pillow. It was the eve of year's end, some days after Naya had given her instructions in the training yard, and they had learned nothing more in the meanwhile. Hewell still had not been sent from the fortress, and they had seen him do nothing nefarious within it. Why, then, had she had this dream now? Was it a sign of something soon to come? "What was it?" said Chet. Did you see anything? Was Hewell there?" "He was," said Lauren, "and he was dressed as a shade again, but this time there was more. He turned into a bird and flew off into the sky." A bird?" said Chet. "Do you mean that he is a weremage?" "I do not know that, any more than I know for certain that he is a shade," said Lauren. "But that is what I saw, and I saw a golden city built on a waterfall. It is not a place I have ever seen before, and yet it was so real. I think it must be a real place, just as I first saw Hewell in a dream and then found him in the waking world." Chet frowned. "But why were you screaming? None of this sounds very terrifying." Almost she... Fallen Clown seems to think, Bodegazilla, every time I say Chet, the character in the book, Fallen Clown thinks I'm saying chat. Almost she answered him. Almost she told him of Tristan and Jordel's grave and Auntie and what had happened to him and Jem and Annis. But at the last moment words failed her and she shrugged. "I saw nothing else, or at least I remember nothing else. Whatever frightened me, it slipped away as I awoke." He looked at her for a long moment. She could see in his eyes that he did not believe her. "Lauren," he said at last, "I have told you that I trust you. Do you not trust me in turn?" A pang of guilt struck her and she pushed herself up on her elbows. I do, of course, Chet, and yet there are things I do not wish to say, not because I fear for you to know them, but because I fear to say them aloud and give strength to the thought behind them. You cannot truly believe that." Lauren shrugged. "How can I know what to believe? I see things in my dreams only to find them in the waking world, and there are things I see that I cannot bear to see come to pass." "And there are things I see that I could not bear if they ever came to pass. Do not force me to say them out loud. I beg you not to." He did not answer her. After a long moment's silence, he lay back down and turned his back to her, drawing the blanket tight around himself against the cold. She waited until his breath had deepened with sleep. Then she went to her cloak and reached within one of the pockets for her brown cloth packet. From it she drew a mage stone. For a long while she looked at it. A wizard who consumes the stone does not dream," Zane had said. She was not a wizard, yet mayhap it would help. Lauren broke the stone in half and slid one piece onto her tongue. It dissolved into nothing and she swallowed. The room did not grow brighter, for she did not have her dagger close to hand, but she felt a calm slip through her. She lay back down beside Chet and was soon asleep, a dreamless sleep at last. Chapter 14 done. All right, and this is where I break for lunch. I'm going to try and have a quick lunch and come right back. And, quick lunch, come right back, keep going. I don't know how far I can get on Weremage today, but I want to get as far as I possibly can. So I'm going to devote as many hours as I am able to getting it today. Okie dokes. All right. That's me for now. I'll be back after I eat and after I investigate why an air raid siren just went off in my town. Probably just testing. Hopefully just testing. Why are they testing? All right. I will catch you another time. Thank you for watching. See you later. Oh, hey, everybody should go pre-order the latest Underrealm book, Nightblade Epic Volume 1. If you're in America and you buy a copy, it'll come signed. Woo! So go do that thing. All right. Catch y'all later.